Hey everyone, welcome to the 403rd episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patrons Paul Power, Alexander Valhuli, and J.A. I'm Oren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Oren. Today we've got Yuki Noguchi on the show to talk to us about his incredible cinematography career and also his insight into financial side of being a filmmaker, of being a freelancer in particular. Should you own gear? How do you invest your money? He's had a really awesome career. He's thought a lot about this, and he has some pretty practical tips on what filmmakers can do to build in a little bit more longevity into their careers. We should say none of us are financial experts. This is all just three artists talking. We say that many, many times, but just at the top, this is not financial advice. But we do talk about our own personal experiences in a way that I think people will relate to.
Yuki's a cinematographer that I've worked with a ton, and he's kind of the one that opened up my eyes to even like thinking about money kind of late in life. And just kind of that realization that like if you have some extra cash, it should not be doing nothing. You should try to grow your wealth. I am curious. I'd love to hear from people. You can email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at justshootitpod. I'd love to hear if this type of episode is interesting to people. I do feel like Oren, like 15 years ago, would like skip an episode about finances.
Mm-hmm.
But now Oren right now would be mad at that Oren because, you know, like I knew about writing off things for taxes for a while. And kind of,
You're like, I should probably do that maybe.
Yeah. And I knew that people incorporated and there were some advantages to it. And I didn't quite know why. But I didn't know about just like planning for my future because all I was like doing was like hustling onto the next job, onto the next script, onto the next short, I'm going to get this indie film off the ground. Like maybe I'm going to save up some money and put it into a camera or a short film or something. And I never kind of thought about the long-term goals. I mean, I think when you're 25 and someone's like, if you started saving now for your retirement, you'd be a millionaire. You're like,
whatever,
who cares?
I'll be a millionaire by the time I'm 29. Yeah. I think your point, you kind of maybe made it offhand, but I think we talk about it a little bit, but the idea that we're entering a high reward profession where, you know, if you quote unquote made it, you're not so worried about that because you're rich, right? You know, you're Steven Spielberg. And so, you know, Indiana Jones movies are going to pay for your retirement forever.
Wait, so do you think like I'm not saying this in a sarcastic way at all. Do you feel like you and I have not made it?
I think that the definition of made it changes the older you get, in so much as when you're younger, made it means that you've heard that person's name, right? That you have, or that you direct things that you can name, right? Like you maybe don't know the name of the director of a Seinfeld episode, but you know Seinfeld, so you know that they've made it, right?
Right. But how many friends do we have that have directed like 4 episodes of TV and now can't get another episode to save their life?
Sure. Yeah.
Like, have they made it? And of shows we've heard of, you know, big shows.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's what I'm saying is that when you're young, you think that Steven Spielberg is making it, or, you know, Michel Gondry or Spike Jonze is making it. People that like you look up to and idolize, but those are name brand blue chip directors. And that the education of working, the more experience you gain, the more you realize that there's a huge spectrum from a person who hasn't made anything and hasn't made any money from making anything up to those people. And that I think, look, having a career and a home and a family in Los Angeles is a version of making it, certainly. But I think you and I both are acutely aware of how much our ambitions leave room for greater success. Would you say you've made it?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't like walk into a room and be like, well, we made it. But like, you know, both of our wives have been on many TV shows that people have heard. You know, your wife was on Westworld and a bunch of other awesome things. My wife's on an HBO show Hacks right now. Like, you know, we've been on things. We've worked with many celebrities that people have heard of. We've had our stuff on TV. You've won many awards. You've been nominated for an Emmy. Like, you know, I think any one of those things, like to a person starting out could think is making it. I do kind of think we both make a living as filmmakers, and yeah, we have houses and cars and kids, and we're not we struggle creatively and financially too, but we've found a rhythm. And if you compare it to like all the people you went to film school with, like how many of them have like quote unquote made it this far? If you add a this far
sure,
onto the end of made it, then we have, and it's like our full-time profession is stressing out about filmmaking.
Yeah, I guess we have. Looks like we made it.
It's, we're working directors.
We're talking about money with Yuki a lot on this episode. I just got off a meeting with co-producer B. Shaheen from See You Next Christmas about the money that's coming in. The movie's available on streaming. It's doing great on Peacock and all of this stuff. We're in the process of kind of, distributing money to some investors and things like that. I was reminded like, oh, this is a job you sign up for, you can't quit from, producing a feature, right? Like until we like turn off the lights and shut off the company, basically,
LLC, yeah.
The LLC, like we're just in it. We go to the accountant every year. We are like, we have a meeting at least once a quarter, but like much more regularly than that, especially now that the movie's picking up some steam. And like talking to investors and all of that stuff. And it's a funny thing to not, I bet that there are producers who don't totally realize on their first movie, like it's a marriage. Like I'm going to be working with B on this for a decade, probably. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a wild thing to realize and think about.
Yeah. I shot a movie in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Came out in 2010. Twice over the last week, people have been asking me if I can get them the French subtitles from this movie. It's almost 2024. We're on the verge of 2024. That'll be, 15 years since I shot it.
Also, good news, getting French subtitles is a heck of a lot easier now than it was back then.
But it is cool that someone wants to screen the movie.
Still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
15 years later. Real quick, we want to say we talked to Yuki for like almost 2 hours. So we're going to make this a 2-part episode. The first part is a lot about like, should you buy gear? Should you own gear? Like, what are the economics of like being a filmmaker that brings their own camera to set? The second half is a little bit more about freelance lifestyle. Like, what should you do? If you make some money, what should you do with it? Like how to invest safely. And Yuki has a lot of thoughts on it. And the last thing before we talk to Yuki, I wanted to remind people that we have a Patreon, patreon.com/justshootitpod. It's a place where you can go to support us. We really, really appreciate it. We will mention your name at the beginning of an episode if that is valuable at all. But really the value that we get is just like, helping keep the podcast going, helping pay Noah, our editor, helping pay all our server fees, and just reminding us that people are listening to the show. So patreon.com/justshootitpod, $1 a month, $4 a month, $10, anything you feel like you can give. Maybe you made some money from the tips in this episode. You learned how to write off your Netflix subscription.
Yeah. They're like, I had no idea. Also, a live show is coming in the new year, so get ready for that.
Now, he's not an NPR host, but he is a cinematographer, Yuki Noguchi. Hey everyone, we are here with Yuki Noguchi, cinematographer extraordinaire. We've talked to many cinematographers, you probably have too, but never anyone that knows as much about money. We probably have talked. Actually, now that I say that out loud, I bet a lot of DPs probably know a lot about money, but of the people that I know, Yuki was the first person to actually get me to start thinking about like how to save money and how to make my money work for me. As freelancers, we do all these jobs, we go from job to job, and we are living in this state of fear and stress and anxiety all the time because maybe we had a couple of great jobs, but now we have a couple months with no jobs. And like knowing that you have money in a bank account that's making money on its own, that's getting interest, or knowing that you've invested in the stock market or somewhere else can make you feel a little bit better. And so we think this is relatable.
We'll say it a couple times, I'm sure. But just to cover everyone's butts, none of us are financial advisors. I can say I'm a pretty big idiot So we're just three artists talking about things that we have done for ourselves to earn and lose money, and really more of a way of thinking about money in general, because I was raised to care about money very much, but not especially. I was resistant to being financially literate, we can say.
Right. You were raised to like order the cheapest thing on the menu,
Right.
but not to invest. Right?
Sure. Yeah. Well, my mom would be like, "No, I really wanted you to invest," and I talked about it all the time, and like I was resistant to that actually. So even stupider than that version, Oren.
Cool.
Yeah. Anyway.
And I guess, and I do want to say, I feel like thematically our show, especially in the last years, has been like about longevity in this business and how you can last and how you can make it through like the ups and downs. And I think this is kind of the answer.
This is it. Yeah.
Is being smart about this.
Yeah.
So Yuki, by the way, I'm going to say your name many times in this episode. Yuki also pays me $5 every time I mention him on the podcast.
That's really the financial secret.
My main income. So am I going to get it every time I mention your name, every time I say Yuki Noguchi, or is it just once per episode? Do we max that at one an episode?
Yeah, every time you get $5.
Boy. Whew.
I think you should. What if I say yukinoguchi.com? Is that worth more?
That's $6.
I will say our friend Derek Cohen reached out and he said, "Hey, if you say my name, I'll give you 10." So here we are. Shout out, Derek.
Yeah, more lucrative.
So Yuki, we're gonna dive in on a handful of things. We're gonna get to gear, which I think is probably the thing that is the most pressing.
Can you tell us a little bit about why you started thinking about this stuff at all? Why you literally wrote a document for freelance filmmakers about numbers?
First of all, thanks for having me. I'm I guess long-time listener, first-time caller. I did write this documents that it's called Filmmaker's Financial Guidebook. And I have been reading a lot about like finance books and kind of slowly started figuring out like how numbers work or like investment works. And I didn't know any of this when I was in 20s. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really a good idea to spread the words to the people who ideally more in like a 20s or 30, like early 30s, like whoever can make time as a weapon and then compound the interest. I think that was the idea. But then I got invited by this podcast and I'm now here talk about it. So yeah, it's that's kind of inspiration of it, that I wanted to just share the knowledge. And then I think when you talk to people, like people just give you so much information dump, right? Like it's just I don't understand any of just terminologies, a lot of like, I can't read so like many rules, or like I don't understand stock market well, like I don't really know many things. And then I think especially in 20s, like what you want to know is like, so where do I start? So at least I can like start compounding interest, which probably people don't even know that term, but in 20s. And I think I just wanted to show them like, hey, this is the simplest place to start, and then you can kind of expand the interest beyond that. But kind of nothing to do with also filmmaking too. So like I think it says Filmmaker's Financial Guidebook, but it's not so much to do with filmmaking per se.
Well, I think it does. 'Cause when I used to be an engineer, like the first thing you do when you get one of those corporate jobs is you set up like your 401k or your IRA, and you like kind of the system in corporate America is built to like help you have some savings and stuff. And you're obviously your local 600 guy, like the union kind of tries to do that
matching too, right? Like they're incentivizing you to stay with the company because they're paying you some version of what you're agreeing to put into those funds, right?
Right. And in theory, you'll work for this company for 10 years and then another company for 20 years. And then 10 years later, you're 65 and you retire, and your 401k has been managed by someone at Schwab or whatever, Vanguard or some money management place. And they've kind of been riskier in the beginning of your life and later and less risky as you get older. But you don't even have to worry about it. It's just in these 401ks, and then you retire, and now you have like a few $1,000,000 to live off of, and hopefully not pay a lot of taxes on because you've retired and you don't make a ton of money and you're in a lower tax bracket and all this stuff. But us as freelancers, we don't have that. I mean, we're worried enough just about how to have health insurance, let alone like saving for when we're in our 60s. And I remember myself when I quit engineering and moved to LA, I was like, I'm going to make so much money as a filmmaker instead of putting this $20,000 I got from like stocks. Like instead of keeping them, I'm going to spend them now to live so that I can make my short film and invest in myself. And then I'll make a lot of money as a filmmaker. But really, if I would have kept those $20,000 worth of stocks, they would be worth, like 20 times as much right now. And that would have been a much better money making
investment
move.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, look, I think especially when you're young, part of the thing that's tricky about filmmaking is that you're always looking up to people who have quote unquote made it and who are super rich. And especially when we wanted to become filmmakers in the very beginning, those people, there were a lot of very wealthy filmmakers out there that we looked up to. And that number has dwindled in a certain sense, right? But you're still, no one says, oh, I want to be Matt Enlow when I grow up. They say, oh, I want to be Dan Kwan when I grow up. And like those guys are making money still, right?
Well, can I ask you, do either one of you guys know filmmakers that you've worked with that are like super wealthy?
The only ones that were born into it.
Like that, I mean, that have become wealthy from
filmmaking.
The film business.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Yuki DP'd for Ben Affleck once, right?
Mm-hmm.
That guy must make a lot of money.
Yeah.
But probably from acting and owning things, right?
Yeah, I think those guys own something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of key to to financial success in, I guess, United States. You have to own something to make money, and then ideally like you're not tied to your wealth is not tied to your time. I think that's the idea of it, I guess.
Right, like number of shoot days is not related directly to how much money you'll make.
Right.
Yeah, ideally, if you can get there, that's
the dream.
Golden. Yeah.
So that's a good segue about owning things. So you own a ton of gear. We were texting before this and we were like, Yuki, you're the money guru. And you're like, texted us back. Well, you guys both own houses and I don't. But you have basically like a house worth of camera gear, right? Like you own Alexa 35. You have like every Red camera. You have from down to the DSLRs and GoPros all the way up to like the Cook anamorphic lenses and right, like the most popular camera in the world right now.
Quite literally a down payment on a house worth of gear, probably, right?
Like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
We won't tell your address where you keep it all in your bedroom.
Yeah, not hard to find me. But yeah, well, I own some cameras and not all the cameras you mentioned, but yeah, I have some camera gears.
You don't have an Alexa 35?
I do have Alexa 35, and
but he wouldn't be cut dead with a Red.
No, but you used to have
Red. I used to have Red. Yeah,
that's right.
You had the Komodo.
You
sold it?
Yeah, sold it.
Oh.
Well, tell us about that strategy because a Komodo is still a camera that people use. It's not like
it's not a Red MX or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like how do you think about gear and owning it and the finances behind it?
I have a lot of idea about that. But so particularly to Komodo, I had a kind of weird relationship with it because I bought it twice, I sold it twice. And it was essentially like, I know like a Komodo is great for the size, but it was just a camera that didn't excite me. It just, the image that came out of it wasn't really something that I wanted to put it in somewhere else. Like, I think to me, like, I like to be inspired by the thing that I'm buying, and I only want to buy things that I want to use. And I think Komodo was kind of barely outside of that realm. And I did need it for one job, so I bought it again. And then after that, I was seeing this camera depreciating, and then I thought that maybe I should just get rid of it when I can.
Well, so I'm curious about this because this is interesting. Do you only buy cameras with the intention to shoot on them, or do you ever buy them to rent them as well? Because you have two. You had the Alexa 35 and the Komodo at the same time, right?
So a better example would be I had an Alexa Mini LF, and first of all, I had Alexa Mini and Alexa Mini LF at the same time, and I sold Mini because I didn't use them, and I just bought Alexa 35 this year, and I just sold Mini LF because it just didn't make sense for me to keep the Mini LF. And I think to me as a DP, I need different tiers of cameras or two of the same camera. And
I see.
Mini LF and Alexa 35s are both high-end camera. And to me, like I have to, and plus they don't match. So it's hard to own those two same tiers of cameras. And I just needed to let go Mini LF because of strike and all the slowness, and I felt like it was depreciating and it was time to let go.
So just to unpack the idea of having two cameras on the same tier, the basically premium, Alexa Mini LF is about as good as it gets, right? Like that's a AAA camera, but you said it didn't match the Mini. And so is it that you want to take both on a job? You want to be shooting two cameras, and so they need to match for that purpose? Or
yeah, I think I do know some people who owns like two of the same cameras. I think a lot of documentary filmmakers, documentary DPs own two cameras, and mostly they use it as A and B cam. So for those, like, I think it makes sense to have two like top tier cameras. But for me, it wasn't matching. It wasn't like whoever wants to pay Alexa 35, like don't want to have hassle of like, oh yeah, Alexa Mini LF, it kind of matches with Alexa 35. Like we're not targeting those producers or directors. So they would say like, why can't we just get two Alexa 35s?
Right.
And like I think bottom line of owning gear is it's kind of first of all, it's only financial, advantage. Not only, but like, the financial advantage has to be more of the priority, and you can always just rent. So you can shoot with, rented camera or someone else's camera. Like it just doesn't have to be your camera for that job. I think job requires different kind of gears, and then I think it's nice to have like Alexa 35 because it's one of the best cameras, and then I think you can just people don't really ask you too many questions about it. But if you have Red Komodo and then you're trying to sell it as like, this is top tier level camera, some directors and producers wouldn't be happy about that choice.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, no one has ever complained about shooting on an Alexa 35.
But also, a lot of times Bill would be like, oh, let's work with this DP. She owns her own camera. Or he has this gear. And then as the director, like, okay, I guess we got to shoot on the red helium or whatever, because that's what the DP owns, even though I kind of want to shoot on Alexa. But you're saying if you have the best camera there is, then that doesn't really become an issue. But if you have a less desirable camera, all of a sudden you're either not getting the job, or you're getting the job and the director's bummed, or you end up just renting the camera the director wants and you don't make any money on the gear. Right?
Yeah. I think that's where, like, we chatted a little bit before, but the goal of filmmaking is getting in the way of your financial ability when you don't have the best camera. But when you have best camera, then it's just picking the tools. So I like sometimes you just need different tools to do different jobs, but if you can have your tool as like if you can have your camera as your main tool and nobody else like sees the differences between like Alexa 35 or Mini LF or like, you know, probably even Mini, I think producers wouldn't care too much. But if you bring up again red camera in a mix, then
Sure.
well, some people cares, and I think red camera has its own place. Like, you know, it's small, and then when you want to like when you want to use different cameras, I think there's definitely spot for that. But I think it's just a tool, and you want to hit the biggest financial area
It's almost
as much
it's a
as
marketing
possible.
decision in a sense, right? Like to me, I was always annoyed when producers would be like, "Oh, we should hire this person because they have a camera." Because it always, to me, the big artistic decision is not what camera does this DP own. The artistic decision is which DP do we go with. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
it's
I
the
think
person behind the camera, right?
That's also kind of struggle of owning gear. I think a lot of people try to see me or like us as like, you know, just a package deal. And I think in past I've tried my best to separate myself from like owning gear. I think whenever I get hired, I would try to separate myself. Like this is my DP rate. This is like what's your camera rate, and it has to be separated. And if they want to try to bring everything into a bundle, I still separate them. Like, all right, so you want to hit this number, but I'm just gonna separate it. Like this is my net rate, and this is a camera rate.
Yuki, you own Master Primes, you own Cook Anamorphics, you own a bunch of easy zooms. Like you can't just have them sitting at home all day. He's got to have them like at a rental house, getting paid for, right? Like there's some math in like Master Primes. I can get a set for $100,000. I need to use them on a shoot that pays me $10,000 for them, and then I need to rent them for like $30,000 worth. And then I need to be able to sell them for $70,000 for them to have been worth buying, right?
Yeah. You just kind of covered like a basis of it. But yeah, essentially, whenever I buy things, like, you know, I always account for the time that I sell the items. And ideally, I can sell the item for somewhere between 50 to 70% of that value. And as long as I don't miss the like timing, I think that's totally doable. Or like unless I break them or like, you know, I use them like, as long as it's in a clean, functional, you know, state, then you can sell them for that price. So yeah, you're trying to make rest of the money, so 30% to 50% back to make even. Well, ideally you make, you know, more than even, but that's the goal. For the lenses, like I would say, a lot of people say lenses are profitable, but from what I'm seeing, they are not. They're actually terrible investment. I would not recommend to anybody else. It should be the bottom of the list for anybody else. I think one lens is great, but yeah, I don't believe that lenses make you money.
Even your easy zooms, those are awesome and like relatively affordable compared to some of your other high end lenses, right? Like more the dock stuff.
So you have to like hustle a lot and then make less. Like that's, you know, sometimes it's easier to just buy very expensive one and let's kind of, you know, rent it out and then make
sit on a feature for a while.
Yeah.
I guess I had always imagined that the reason why lenses were profitable is that they last so long, right? Like that, you know, we're still shooting on, you know, glass that was made in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and maybe sometimes rehoused or something like that, but that the elements essentially are timeless and that they age with us in a way that a camera body tends to, especially in this climate. The technology is just moving so quickly that the state-of-the-art camera an Alexa Mini from 5 years ago is 3 generations old at this point, and no longer in fashion, even if it's an incredible image. You know what I mean? So is there any credence to that? Is it a long game, or is it just that the price of rental is so low that it's just never going to pan out?
Yeah, I think there's a truth to that. The lens last or possibly hold the value for a long time. The problem is, I think for me, it's all hindsight. Like it's just we're looking back and we're picking the lenses and cameras that did well. But when you're in it, it's really hard to say which one will do how much. And for instance, like nobody talks about Cook S4s or S7s, like, you know, like, or S5s. Like people don't, like S5 was so expensive, nobody really used it. And then so as S7, and S7 was destroyed by S8, which is from Cook. Like, how can you use S7 over S8 when S8's out? So I think, you know, we can keep talking about how super speeds are great because it lasted for a long time. But like, I have Ultra Primes and I bought it for like 68,000 or so, like a long time ago. And then now it sells for like 30 something. And that's just insane.
And you don't think you've made 38,000 back on them?
I probably have. So here's the two points that I want to talk to you guys about, and I think people can take some lesson from me. Bottom line is whatever you're using, whatever it is, like whatever you use every day, every shoot, or, you know, like maybe 20 times a year, whatever it is, like if you use it often enough, that's good stuff. Like, so if you use a lens every time you shoot, that's good investment. You should buy them. Like if you don't use them, if you're choosing between other things, like, you know, that was my Mini LF, like Mini LF for Alexa 35. I'm choosing. It's like already 50% rental right there. So like I should probably get rid of one as just a single person DP. It's different for rental houses because rental houses needs more options for people to, you know, come back. So I think that's good for them, but I don't think particularly, me owning a lot of options for lenses are not profitable. And I can talk to you guys about like a kind of specificity of numbers that I just kind of go off of. This is not scientific. This is just kind of how I see in my head. But so essentially anytime I buy an item or equipment, I think of like how many times I had to rent it out to pay off. Or pay off as in zero. So like actually that number is not true, but like, you know, I would try to pay entire cost. So if and the good, usually items are around like a 50 to 75 times rental. So like around 2% to somewhere between 1 to 2% rental, 1.5%, I guess. So that's regular. That's normal return rate for the camera gear.
So if you bought something for $10,000, you need to rent it for $150 for you to be happy with it, right?
Or vice versa. If something's renting out $150 a day, and then if that costs $10,000, then maybe I should consider buying the item.
I see. Okay. That's how you decide whether it's worth
it. You go by the rental rates to determine your budget.
For
an item.
And if it's 20 times, then you should definitely buy as soon as possible. So there are certain items that's 20 times.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, usually all the lightings are 20 times. They always say it's a 1 day weekly rate, but I don't believe that. They you know, on a commercial they charge for 1 day. So it's 20 times, and then usually that's they are out, which is great returns. And lenses are somewhere around 100 to 150 times. That's a long time, like a lot of rentals to pay off. Yeah, so those are the numbers. I think you know, easy zooms are probably like a 50. Like I think that's why it's good, and it's cheap, but it's also popular.
Right. So it's less about, I mean, the sticker price is part of it, but it's really about what the the ease of
rental.
paying it off than rental. Let me ask actually a clarification point. When we're talking about you renting this gear out, is it sitting in your garage and you're just like keeping an eye on your ShareGrid account? Is it consigned to, Cinelease? Like who is managing this gear, and
Mhm.
are they taking a cut?
I might be a little bit different case from other people because I do have a lot of stuff. So mostly I have only camera items. I've been selling a lot of lighting, so sticking with camera stuff. I have 4 rental houses to put the
Mhm.
gear in, and it's called consignment. And usually they take 40% and you take 60% of rental rate.
Mhm. And that 40% is like for stocking, and they do all the invoicing, and you just get a check at the end of the month, basically.
Yeah. Well, this is the case that they rent it out. So
Mhm.
it's not you renting them out. Like it's they found the renter and then they rent it out. You did nothing. You just
Mhm.
left. You just because you own the gear, you take 60% of the cut. Of course, the number I don't know if that's faithful number.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
hard to say because everything's discounted, and I don't know which items are discounted. So as a consigner, I can tell you that it's really rare that consignment will pay the gear off.
Mm.
And if they do, why don't they buy one? Right. Like, so like as a
Sure,
rental
sure.
house owner, it's
Sure.
like, there's a reason that
Yeah.
they don't want to touch whatever I'm leaving there. So yeah, I think it's kind of hard game to play. Some
Mhm.
people think they can pay off the stuff by themselves or by the consignment, but I think truly I cannot do that, and I only I could only pay off the gear if I'm DPing and I'm
Mhm.
bringing the gear to my job.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I would probably not touch the gear at all.
So you have to go pick up the gear every time you book a job. You're like, hold on, I gotta swing by the house and go pick it up.
Yeah, I have some items at home.
Mhm.
I don't consign my Alexa,
Mhm.
just because I just want that to be available for my shoot all the time.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
but for instance, like lenses, it's just such a high value in like small cases. I don't want
Mhm.
that to be stolen. I don't want that to be burned down or whatever it is. Like it's
Sure.
I just leave it at the rental house, and I don't need them for every job. I'm just picking one of the lenses, or I still rent a lot of lenses a
Mhm.
lot of times, so it's case by case. But yeah, usually lenses are outside. Some big items are outside for the storage sake, and yeah.
And when you decide like, oh, I'm gonna go ahead and buy this camera and I want to put it up for consignment at some one of these places, do you reach out to them in advance? Do they say, oh, sorry, Yuki, we've got a bunch of these already? Is that part of the equation as well?
So yes and no. Essentially, bottom line is I don't have camera consigned, so it's hard to tell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think camera will be paid out of
Sure.
consignment.
Yeah.
When I buy things, like I think my metric is just, can I pay this off without the consignment? Can I, and do I want to use it? Do I want that to be my
Mm-hmm.
creative options? I think those are like a metric to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and if I want to use it and if it excites me to be a DP to use the item, then I think,
Yeah. That's great. That's
I
kind of
own
more
it.
of a
Yeah.
holistic approach. And especially when you hear the margins on consignment, it makes a lot more
Yeah.
sense.
But there is like a trend following too, right? Like during COVID, when everyone was doing Zoom stuff, you bought a whole system to transmit the image over Zoom, right? Like there is like, you see a need, like, oh, this is getting really popular. I'm going to buy this. This is losing popularity. Like you have, right, these like amazing master primes, but they're not a full frame. They don't work. Not all of them work great on full frame sensors, right? So now maybe I guess, you're not going to invest in lenses anyway, but there is like it's almost like instead of keeping an eye on the stock market, you're keeping an eye on like rental rates, like what's popular, how much, like if a camera's losing value, you got to sell it. Like, how do you keep track of all that stuff? Is there a website? Is there like a Robinhood for camera prices?
Yeah. So, well, I started tracking this like very closely after COVID. And before that, I was just really amateuring this process. But now I have ROI set up, and then I track every single items, how they're doing. It's that's where I concluded that lenses are not good investment. I think that's where it came from.
You finally built the spreadsheet and you're like, oh no.
Yeah, this is no way. I have to move it to the stock market.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, well, I wanted to use this for unpaid endorsement, but I use this app called Notion, and I created database, and then I just inputs everything by myself. So I can tell you know how much consignment's making me money, or which consignment houses are making me how much money back. And yeah, there are a lot of interesting numbers, but also depressing. So
so my last question about owning gear is like, how often do you use it for like a passion project or to like shoot a spec or for fun? Like, to me, that's like, I think as a director, you think about owning gear because you're like, oh, I'm going to go shoot my short, and I'm going to do a proof of concept. Like Matt and I have a Blackmagic 6K that I've used one time.
Well, I use it all the time, if that makes you feel any better.
I have a Sony A7S III that, you know, obviously it's not the same level as your cameras, but I've spent like $6,000 or $7,000 to get lenses and all the whole thing. And I use it 99.9% for auditions, to shoot my wife's auditions, which, you know, I actually think it's a good camera for auditions.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I think as a filmmaker, we always want to own cameras and own gear. And I was telling you, our buddy Tom Morris and the DP he works with a lot, Brooks, they wanted to buy an Alexa 35, and they're like, we buy it. Look, we get like every job we have, there's like a $9,000 like camera budget. And then, you know, we only need to work like 12 jobs. And I'm like, dude, that you're saying that you have one job with a $9,000 camera budget, and your next job has like a $500 camera. Like, and now you're going to have to manage it. And it's not just the camera. You have to buy the batteries. You have to buy the media. You have to buy camera support. Like, right? No one's going to get it without a like sticks or anything. Like, now you need a head, and that's like a few $1,000s. And it's like, it just gets so expensive to just buy this thing, and then like renting it out is a whole job on its own. So I don't know. It's do you know any filmmakers that own gear that are like making money off of it, or like more directors? I mean,
directors. Some production company that I know of, like some do documentaries, and then they can pick up the camera and go. But I think there's a reason that big studios don't own cameras. You know, I think I think like a couple things that I want to toss into the idea is that I make most money when I have ecosystem, and in order, like, if you can't create the ecosystem, you probably shouldn't have any gear. Or like, I think you're just chipping away small things here and there. So ecosystem, as in, like, you know, my camera goes out, but as you said, like, I need to have batteries, I need to have tripods, I need to have all the other things, Mapbox, filters, all the like media is like, I think I have to have all the best, and then that creates an ecosystem. So like, I'm not making only one thing rented out, I'm making everything rented out with fair price. And long time ago, my friend, your friend too, Oren, Jeff Dolan, told me that you know, just do not buy anything like, I guess, cheap. Like, just buy some, just buy industry. Yeah, just buy best of the best industry standard items. And I think that's so true. I bought so many map boxes and ended up buying Ari map box, and that hasn't been changed for like 5 years. And you know, it's just like, once you have the best of the best and create the ecosystem, then it's kind of easy to buy. Like, I can buy like a medium level cameras, and I can use the same support system that I have for the Alexa. So I think those make sense to me, but as a way around, I think chipping away one, like if someone's trying to buy one camera body, but they don't have good support system, they cannot even make one professional package out of it. That's I think that's more of the I would say like I think there's a notion that like when you own the gear, you give it for free, and I think that's a bad place to be, like as an owner, and then also as like whoever's profiting from it, because it only works for a few times and it doesn't create win-win situations. So I think any commercials that I do, they probably have budget for the camera. Like either I'm on it or not on it. Like, they can't bid the project based off of like, oh, this guy is going to give us like a really great deal. Then that production companies goes to just so little from there. So I think those are not really big. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I lost my thoughts.
I think maybe, the other way of thinking of it is, because I love this ecosystem, you have to save someone a trip to the rental house, right? Like if you're like, oh yeah, I've got a camera body, but you still have to get all of the other stuff. And frankly, a lot of that stuff is the stuff that like when people are discounting, they'll be like, oh, okay, well, we'll give you the body for a full price, but batteries will knock them down a little bit, or we'll nickel and dime some of this other stuff. But so you have to be literally the whole package. It makes me think of I knew a producer who went in with some buddies on walkies, and I was so jealous because walkies you need on every single job. They're pretty darn expensive, and he was just renting, but it was him and a DP that went in 50-50. They were just off the shelf the entire time. They were constantly being rented. And so they paid themselves off immediately. And to your point, Yuki, they weren't on consignment. It was just that the two stakeholders worked enough that they would always get chipped in. So if a DP is like, oh, hey, I've got these great walkies, here's the rate. Can I get a kit fee for that? And you're making a producer's life easier. There you go. Right.
Yeah. Should all invest in walkies.
I was like, actually, before we shift, Yuki, can you think of any piece of kit that a director could rent that would make sense for a director to own, that they could rent to a production?
How this system works is, I think, whoever gets the job closest to the job source gets first say in whatever they have. So if the production company owns a camera, they would probably say, we have to use this camera, and they have rights to say it because they got the job. Or if director get the job, and if director has a camera, director want DP to use that camera, it's his call. So I think it comes down to also, you could buy walkie-talkie, you could buy, fog machine, like whatever you use all the time. you have to have, hey, I have to have this monitor. Like this, I cannot see any other way but this monitor. Then like you get to put that on a job every time. But it's some might ask why it has to be this monitor. So I think, I don't know what else is like being rented. You guys have access to budget, so you can see like what's rented, and like you can just say, hey, I have this. Like, can I?
I love the idea of just rolling up to every job with like pop-up tents and folding chairs.
Yeah,
margins are bad on
real
those.
production stuff. when I was coming up and I was working with like our friends at Sawhorse and stuff, and doing quick interviews for Teen Vogue and whatever, and shooting them on 5Ds and bringing my Kino kit, like they would give me little rental fees and things a lot of times, and I was like doing everything, shooting and directing and trying to do all that stuff. So I think there is like a level, if you're kind of a content creator, branded content, like kind of doing smaller things, or, Yuki, you mentioned like documentary stuff. There is a level where it's really easy to get your gear working and to get, because it's not $10,000 a rental. It's like $500 a rental. It's like easier, more palatable for these kind of like run and gun type productions. But when you're trying to do kind of bigger broadcast level productions, yeah, either you have the Alexa 35 or you rent it, but you're not going to be using your Sony FX3 for this like awesome giant shoot, unless it's the creator.
Sure.
Hey everyone, we're going to interrupt this episode. Just as a reminder, we're making this a 2-part episode. So thank you, Yuki, for all the advice you've given so far about camera ownership and how you do the math to own things. We have a lot more great things we talked to you about, such as whether you should incorporate or not and why people would want to do that. Also about kind of saving money and making money and various money things that a lot of us don't get into this business for because we care about the creative part, but is important for us to have longevity in it. So stay tuned for part 2.